Revelation 4004. From the 20th and 21st. March 1947. Eternal cycle. Permanent union. Strength. In the divine works of creation, the power from God condenses and becomes form. What the human eye beholds thus testifies both to God's creative will and to his omnipotence, which can bring everything to pass that God wills. Omnipotence and will, however, are governed by wisdom and crowned by love. Where love, wisdom and omnipotence are active, only highly perfect works of creation can come into being, that is, they must reveal meaning and purpose, and their purpose must again correspond to God's love and wisdom. It must be the perfecting of what is still imperfect. The strength flowing from God constantly increases. It flows towards the smallest entities whirring in the universe, drives them to unite until an infinite number of essential substances have been found, directed by God's will, and is visible to the human eye as a new creation. All beingness is animated by a will which, although it can no longer determine itself, can nevertheless turn its direction towards or away from God. And the form into which the beingness is shaped by God's will and power is accordingly. For God's will and wisdom has set the attainment of perfection as the final goal for the beingness, the attainment of the state which results in unification with God Himself. Through constant unification with equally mature spiritual beings, God's emanation of strength is also constantly called upon, for it is the stimulus according to which the entities seek and unite. The strength from God is love, and love will always awaken the desire for unification, which is why the whole of creation can also be called God's strength of love, which has become form. Its fundamental substance is love, just as it always testifies to God's love to the one who seriously reflects on the meaning and purpose of creation and awakens love in the human being again if he has recognized God as the eternal love through his works. But the purposefulness of creation can only be recognized by the human being in a certain state of maturity, namely when the divine strength of love can also flow into him, which then awakens the spiritual in him to life again, so that it likewise seeks to establish unity with equally mature spiritual beings. However, this union is then no longer achieved on earthly creations, but now the spiritual in the human being rises into pure spiritual spheres and establishes the connection with the inhabitants of these spheres. It is therefore, as it were, a cycle. The power emanating from God flows into the universe, animates innumerable entities, drives them to unite and thus condenses into form, depending on the will to resist God into solid or slightly soluble matter, until through constant uniting the soul of the human being has formed itself, which now again, through the supply of power, forms itself in such a way that spiritual beings from the kingdom of light, from non-material creation, unite with it, which now forms itself again through the supply of strength, depending on its willingness to receive, so that spiritual beings from the kingdom of light, from non-material creation, unite with it and draw it over into the spheres of light, so that it can now also find unification with God through elevated striving, on earth or in the spiritual kingdom. And now the strength which has gone out from him has flowed back to him again, multiplied in itself. Because a constantly effective strength always generates new strength. This cycle unwinds according to divine fundamental law, always repeating itself within a specific period of time, and it is therefore an eternal process of creation. Eternally new forms will emerge from God's will to shape, since his love, wisdom and strength never end, since his love constantly seeks to please. His wisdom knows the right ways to put that which is still imperfect into the state which signifies bliss. And since his power must develop, because power is life and God, as eternal love himself must be constantly active and thus he manifests himself in his works. How the process of upward development proceeds can only be understood by the human being whose spirit is awakened, who has already established the union of the spirit spark slumbering in him with the Father Spirit from eternity, or who constantly strives to establish it, who consciously strives towards God and thereby also matures in knowledge. The creation and shaping of the divine Creator has become comprehensible to him through his works, for God speaks to him through creation if he cannot be directly instructed by the voice of the Spirit. And then the human being's soul has also emerged from its banished state. Then it can certainly still dwell on earth according to the body, but it can rise into spiritual spheres at any time, for once it has recognized God it consciously strives towards him, and its dwelling on earth will no longer last for long. The spiritual in it returns to its origin from eternity, it unites with the luminous, it unites with God and will be indescribably blissful. Amen.